As a child, I had an IEP with 5 sections, but I also lost my mother at 7. So, and in those times, it wasn't really practice to go to therapy, but I went to a public school that had counselors, and the counselors held grief classes for us. So it was myself, there was another girl there, and I lost my mom at 7. Her mom was killed at 5, and another one had lost her mom like maybe 7th or 8th grade. And so they had this group for us at the public school in the counselor's office every Thursday. I remember we were out of class for 45 minutes every Thursday, and this counselor sat with us and she did different exercises with us and different techniques with us to ask us how we were doing. That's what DEI is to its core, meeting those individual needs that are as small as I need 10 minutes by myself in the cozy corner, or as big as the last time I ate was when you fed me lunch yesterday.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lived Experience podcast. I'm really excited. I'm Dr. Tamea Ryan, and today I'm honored to host an Educators Rise Enterprises Roundtable, bringing together voices who are collectively transforming education through diversity, equity, and inclusion. Leading our conversation is Dr. Heather Robinson, the visionary founder of Educators Rise Enterprises, a renowned education advocate, DEI consultant, 8-time published author, and Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award winner. I'm also excited to have Professor Steve Maynard Jr. here, who is a retired Marine Corps Master Gunnery Sergeant turned Assistant Professor of Communication and founder of Communicate to Lead Consulting, who believes we must communicate to lead, lead to inspire. We also are joined by Philip Lyde, an educator and advocate with over 20 years of experience bridging the gaps between families, educators, and the systems meant to serve students of all abilities. Martisha Smith, who is a special education educator and founder of the New Growth Behavioral Council, whose mantra says it all. We listen, we understand, we teach with purpose. We're also joined here by Tammy Walsham, a passionate K-12 educator with 25 years of experience and a heart for special education, who believes success is built through persistence, not perfection. Dr. Kara Logmeyer is a doctorate of education, early childhood advocate whose mission is leveling and playing the field and making sure that it's equitable for all. And last but not least, Dr. Alicia Broughton, a college professor, author, brand strategist, and media personality whose work across academia and community advocacy is sparking lasting change in education. Did I get everyone? There's a lot of excellence on the call today, so I want to make sure I got everyone. Thank you all so much for joining today. And these voices represent a shared conviction that every student deserves to be seen, supported, and given an equitable opportunity to thrive. So this isn't just a talk about education. It's really a conversation about the future and how we can all rise together. Dr. Robinson, can you share the vision behind Educators Rise Enterprises and what brought this group of educators together around the mission of diversity, equity, and inclusion in education?
So I'm gonna work backwards because Educators Rise, Voices That Change, the anthology came about before Educators Rise Enterprises. So from 2001 to March of this year was Anointed to Write. So if I backtrack, back in 2024, I actually was praying and I was asking God, what can I do next? Because I had been an author since 2016. I've been teaching for a while and kind of merging teaching and writing, where I was teaching people writers workshops. And I had a girlfriend come to me and she said, when are you going to stop running? I said, running from what? So I'm right where I'm supposed to be. She said, no. When are you going to tap into what you've been doing? I didn't know what she was talking about. So she said, you've been an educator all these years. You never thought to do something in education? And I said, I am doing something in education. I'm in the classroom. She said, no, with your writing. So then she said, if you had to write a book and bring together a group of educators, what would the book be about? And so the tagline for Notice to Right was giving a voice to those who feel silence. And in that moment, I connected it because in the beginning, it was just about me being silenced by grief and shame. But then I thought about it and connected it to the classroom and how students need a voice too. And sometimes we are their voice. So long story short, we brainstormed. She said, well, what do you want to do with giving a voice? I said, I want to bridge gaps, which I did my dissertation on, bridging the gaps that so easily separates us. And then she said, now, what do you want the educators to do? I said, I want the educators to rise. She said, give me 30 minutes. I didn't know what she was doing. She came back with a cover. She paid the graphic designer to do the cover and everything. So for those that were in volume 1, Dr. Shamika Livingston actually came up with that concept of the cover. It was not me. I told her what I wanted. I told her I wanted it to have DEI and I wanted to have 2 bridges that were apart and the DEI would connect the bridge, and she took creative license. So that's how the anthology was born. Now, this was before all this nonsense would happen. I had no idea we were going to be stepping into what we stepped into in 2025. But majority of the people that are on now have been in volume 1 and volume 3, volume 2 and volume 3, or volume 1, 2, and 3, with the exception of Professor Stu, who I just met. He's on volume 3. So that is how all of this came about. It wasn't planned per se. This was supposed to be a one-hit wonder situation. I got a bucket list. All right, I did an anthology. Okay, I did an in-person conference. All right, I'm done. But it grew arms and legs, and here we are.
Thank you for sharing the origin story of this. And like you said, no one expected, especially I think in the education field, that we were going to be stepping into what DEI has emerged as being this controversial topic, unfortunately. And I love conversations like this to talk about, no, it's really not controversial. It's what's needed. And having this conversation is really important. I'd like to open it up just to everyone to hear from you all what this experience has been like for you. And we can start first with Tammy, if you'd like to share.
So it's been a good experience for me. I've never been an author before, so this has allowed me to see things about myself that I didn't necessarily know were there. And really just meeting really great people that are like-minded. I mean, even in education, you might be in education, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're like-minded about certain things. So it's really allowed me to be able to just open up myself more and be able to see just different things that I hadn't seen before the experience. So,
for sharing. Would anyone else like to share just what this experience has meant for you as an educator and someone in this field?
Well, personally, for me, this experience has been very meaningful from a professional standpoint and from a personal standpoint. It really required for me to dig inside myself as an educator, as a mother, as a doctoral holder, to really evaluate, analyze what do DEI mean in the field of education. Why is it important? Why should we build a gap? How do I see DEI in my classroom? And how do I help those students to build inside the gaps inside my classroom that needs differential learning, who might need assistive technology, who may need, additional learning tools. So in DEI is everywhere. It's outside the classroom. It's outside the job place. It's even the way that we communicate with our families. Our families are diverse. So, it just took a life of its own. And, this is my first time having an opportunity to be an author, so it just helped me to build my credentials as well. And I just really grown. And it just helped me just to see the world differently. So it has been very impactful for me.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Would anyone else like to share before we hop into some discussions with Dr. Broughton and Professor Maynard?
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
I think because I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Robinson and most of the people last year for Volume 1, then switching over and doing the forward for Volume 2, and then writing Volume 3, I think for me it's been enlightening, so to speak, because and I've shared this before, that I really thought on face value that DEI was just another marketing ploy for affirmative action, just another political slant, so to speak. But as I got into the book in Volume 1, I recognized that it's a lot more intrinsic than people give it credit for. And people want to typecast it just like they do any other type of stereotypes or statistics. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to justify the fact that they'd rather keep an oppressive nation or an oppressive society rather than providing people with the equity under the faith that they believe in. So I will say, for me, learning more about DEI as an educator made me realize that this is something that we've always been fighting for as a collective. Now you just have a name to it. And with that name, it obviously has a positive impact, because anybody who is, excuse my language, who is hell-bent on trying to destroy that ideology, it's showing that there's more of a need than anything else. So
Yes, thank you for that. And, I have this conversation sometimes because they'll say, well, we've got diversity. We have Black folks here. And it's like, that's just one piece of the pie. You can have the numbers, but you also need the inclusivity. You need the equity. Without that, you're only getting one component. And so I'm really glad to have this conversation with you all today.
you made me just think of something, and I've been using it almost as a running joke, but I think the scary part about it is it's probably life imitating art at this point. So I've always used the book Animal Farm. And for those of you in literature who are familiar with Animal Farm, there's a quote by the pigs that says, "Everyone is created equal. All animals are created equal. Some animals are just created more equal," right? And so I think about that when I think about DEI and the impact that it has, because when you're in a situation like I am and you teach Title I public schools, you don't have the luxury of discriminating. You don't have the luxury of stereotyping kids, because most of your kids are homogenous in terms of culturally. And then you might have your occasional non-melanated or white person that comes to the school in a school that's majority Black. But now you're looking at it from the lens, not through race, but now you're looking at it through the lens of economics. And so when we look at it through the lens of economics and we look at it through the lens of character, what is DEI framed up to be, right? And so that's, and I, like I said, I often use the reference from Animal Farm because it looks like a lot of that is being played out in real life, especially on both sides of the argument.
Yes, thank you for that, breaking that down. I'd love to get into a conversation here with Dr. Broughton. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Yes. Good
Okay.
evening. How are you?
Sorry,
Good.
I
How
was
are
on
you?
mute.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I'm gonna clean up y'all intros too, because I was getting
My mama
tongue-tied.
named me Heather, just in case. But if you're gonna be formal, it's Robinson. But my mama named me Heather.
Oh, okay. I always like to show the respect. I'm like, and then when you say it's okay, I'll go ahead. So, thank you for that. So I'd like to get into a conversation with Professor Maynard. Thank you for your service as well, and Dr. Broughton, about just coming from academia, media, and military service. What would you say that genuine DEI looks like in the classroom versus what people's conception of DEI is?
I'll defer to Dr. Broughton.
So I would say that
we have to start small. We can't fix everything right away. And we're not meant to fix everything. We got to focus on building trust and creating a safe environment by providing support to our students and to our staff. We can't be afraid to use our school's resources inside and outside of the classroom. So, my chapter in the book, I talked about mental health. And the reason I chose mental health is because we don't think of DI as being affected by mental health. So, I said mental health needs to be a part of our daily conversations every day, not just a poster on the wall. Schools can start by giving staff real training on mental health and trauma-informed practices. Simple things like breaks, accesses to counselors for the kids, a safe place for our kids to be to make a big difference. And we need to make sure that as teachers, we're also setting boundaries for ourselves. That's very important because if we're not good, the kids are not good. And part of this book, it's allowed me also to recognize it's okay not to be okay, because there's other people that are going through some of the same things that we're going through. So my takeaways from the book is, it's okay not to be okay. And it's been an asset where we can actually talk about some of the things that are affecting us by DEI. So when I was researching, I found, teaching is very demanding. And according to the American Federation of Teachers, 61% of educators report that their work is always stressful. Chronic stress and burned out is very vital among teachers. In 2022, according to CDA, it says that teachers were burnt out and began to experience health and mental health issues. When teachers struggle with the mental health, it affects them more than anything else. It affects our climate in the classroom, it affects our students' learning outcomes, and it affects the overall school environment. So I would just say that the media side of it, as we're looking around in the media, we see a lot going on with kids are committing suicide. We see a lot of depression going on in our schools. We see a lot of kids that are being bullied, which is also a part of DEI because we have so many kids that are literally separated. They're made to feel like they don't belong. And not even children as staff of color. How many of us on this web podcast tonight, how many of us have felt like we've been singled out? Maybe because we were a woman. Reality shows that men make a whole lot more money than women. So we've been also singled out in a lot of other ways as well. So just remembering that we're worthy of support and understanding. We're learning to grow every day, and we're not alone in our struggles. Mental health matters just as much as anything else in our lives. We have the strength to get through this. Once in a while, we got to remind ourselves that we are important as well, and that our mental health means everything as well.
Yes, thank you for that. And breaking down, as I say, when the hashtags are gone, because we all saw the hashtags, a few years ago, it was like Black Lives Matters, this, that, diversity, and then it just quickly was shut down, And so, but we keep it going. We keep integrating it in the work that we do. Thank you for that. Professor Maynard, Steve, would love to hear your take on just what DEI has looked like in the classroom for you and any thoughts that you have on addressing the gap between the intention and the reality of putting it into practice.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the panel with the other contributors to Volume 3. For me, Philip touched on something about the selection of students that we have in our charge. I teach at a community college, and the ages, the socioeconomic status, the religions is so diverse. And one of the first questions I ask on day one is, anybody in here a twin? And if you are you different than your twin? And the twins who are in the room say, yeah, I'm different than my brother or my sister. And I highlight the importance that we as humans, each one of us are born We're the only human on the planet like us. So whether you want to accept the fact that diversity plays a role in your life, it does, because none of us are alike. But our differences don't make us enemies. And our differences is what allows us an opportunity to grow and to learn from someone who is not like we are, who doesn't think, believe, or act the way we do. And volume 3, focusing on how do we take DEI and enact it on a daily basis in our classrooms, in our lives. Coming from the military perspective, the community college and the military are one and the same to me, because you have people from all over the place coming into an organization for one common goal. Everybody's reason is different, but you meet so many unique and different people, which makes the body of the institutions great, because you don't have a single line of thinking or a single line of perspective or thought or religion. As much as the current administration is trying to narrow everyone into a single, compliance-based look like one single thing, that is absolutely the opposite of what the military and community colleges stand for. And joining the Marine Corps, for me, knowing the history of the Marine Corps, that of the big 4 branches, the Marine Corps was the last to integrate. And then when we did integrate, we didn't train with white Marines. We were sent to Munford Point, North Carolina, and that's where Black Marines were trained to be Marines. So I saw it as a unique challenge. I knew it was one of the more challenging branches of service. And I knew the history, because every poster I looked at, it was a bald, white male. Very, very few Blacks, very few Hispanics, very few Asian, and even fewer females. I looked at that as an opportunity to plant my legacy in that organization to show by example. You don't have to look like what you see on the poster. Matter of fact, you can become the poster of what it looks like to be a United States Marine. So I bring all of those things together to formulate my plan and my vision in encouraging diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, because just because someone doesn't like the title or the name doesn't mean that we're not doing it. And we talked about this in another podcast and one-on-one with Dr. Robinson. You ain't got to like it, but then when you start pointing literal things out to people using the analogy like Philip used, it is so obvious that everybody is impacted by diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And embracing it and teaching people who are opposed to it, teaching them that you're already doing it and you might as well embrace it, because we're not going away.
Yes. And I love what you said about helping people to see that it impacts everyone. They can sometimes be resistant to the fact of that, but I think conflict, in my experience, sometimes needs to happen to produce change and to really have those conversations. And so from your lived experiences and all of our lived experiences, we've all encountered those feelings of feeling rejected, not being included, being treated differently. And so that drives, and I can tell that drives the passion for y'all to keep coming back doing this, even as hard as it is. So thank you for sharing your story. And does anyone else want to speak about just how your lived experiences drives the work that you do? I know many of you have already touched on just encountering adversity yourself, but how has your lived experiences really continue to help you move through this, as hard as it is, especially in this political climate? It's tougher than ever.
I think that, at least for myself, one of the key things that it reminds me of is the fact that in order for there to be any significant change, people got to change their hearts. Because we could be the most educated people on the planet, we could be the most athletic, we could be the most beautiful, we could be the most articulate, but at the same time, there's going to be a group of people, a small minority, that's going to paint this narrative that we're still drug dealers and crooks and hustlers and schemers and promiscuous and all these other things, right? And from my personal interactions with my counterparts, right, non-melanated counterparts, one of the things I recognize is that they're highly intimidated, and I'm not saying this to be impressive, but they're highly intimidated by the scope of education that we have, the scope of emotional intelligence that we have and resolve. Because if you can think of another group in the history of mankind that's been able to endure for as long as we have in this society and still thrive in many pockets, I'd be hard pressed to find another group, right? And so even when we look at the fact that it's not going to change until people get revelation, right? Revolution's not going to come without revelation, and peace cannot come without conflict. And the problem is you have too many people that are too apathetic to the way society treats us, right? To how they're being treated themselves, to where they don't even realize the significance of what happens if one day the majority of us decides to withdraw from the system. This place would collapse on its own. And you don't have to do all the other stuff that they try to make you do, you know?
I think you back a little bit off of what Philip said, Minister Philip, by the way. When you talked about restoration, it made me think about putting something on and putting something off, right? Repentance. You turn away from one thing and focus on another. We have to turn away from this one-sided thinking or this narrow-minded thinking and turn towards being more open-minded, because DEI is about people. It's not about one particular group. It's about people. And I did a live earlier with Marty. She's not on. And I always bring this up. You guys have all heard me say it. I've been live with Philip, Dr. Alicia, Professor Steve. We've all done live interviews with each other. And one of the things I always talk about, the example I give, is the man, because typically in society, you know, it's the white man, the white woman, and then everybody else under. But when you're looking at DEI, you can even look at the white man and the white woman. There's still a gap. If that white woman and that white man both have a PhD with a 4.0, they both have 15 years of experience, they both have impeccable reputations and impeccable portfolios, 9 times out of 10, when they both apply for the same job, that white man's going to get it over the white woman. It's not just a black issue. It's not just a man issue. It's not just a woman issue. It's not just a child issue. It's not just a school issue. It is a people issue. It is a human issue. The bare minimum in life is to feel like you have a sense of belonging, right? We all want to feel like we belong, we're valued, we're seen and we're heard. We want to feel represented. We want to see ourselves, some type of representation, so that we can feel that connection. And then we want our needs to be met, our individual needs to be met, whatever that is. That is the least we can do as a human race. That's the least we can do. And that's asking for the bare minimum, that I have representation, that my individual needs are met, and that I feel a sense of belonging and I feel valued. That is the bare minimum, and that is the least that we can do. And that is a human desire. Not just man, not just woman, not just child, not just black, not just white, not just Indian. That is a human desire and need. So I just wanted to plug that in.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think, it's sometimes it's so hard when you're saying that these are just basic level human needs we're wanting, and that's a problem, and it's like, okay, if we having a problem with just the basic how are we going to get to these higher levels? But that is through all like the work that you're doing and other educators that are pushing it forward. I want to tap in with Tammy here for a bit and Philip. And I know you all work with special needs populations. And how does DEI specifically impact students with learning differences? And what changes are needed in how we serve these students?
So, with students that are in special education, they a lot of times have some different needs than you may really just be aware of. At a lot of times, they're dealing with different things, things inside and outside of the classroom, and it can be difficult. As a special educator, just you connect with your kids, and so
Right.
yeah, so it's just it's just important to just really understand that kids are dealing with different things inside and outside the classroom, and you want to make sure that you're a space for them when they need it. And I would say, if we're going to say what's needed, is we need more educators that can be a safe space for the kids, because not every educator is a safe space. And even if you're not necessarily in the classroom, DEI is so impactful because it's not just an academic need that they have a lot of times. And so even a student coming into the classroom and just needing to talk, even giving them space is something that's significant. And you just never know what is going on outside. And when kids come in with different behaviors that you may not necessarily be used to, like giving them the space and understanding that a lot of times students, they say a lot without saying words. And being able to be a safe space is so significant.
Thank you for that. And that's, what you said about a safe space. I can think back to, I'm going to give a little short story and then I'm going to pass it over to you, Philip. But I think back to my elementary school days, and we lived in a white neighborhood, kind of the beginning of my childhood. And I had one Black teacher, Mrs. Johnson, and it wasn't many Black students in the class either. But I have this vivid memory of, it was me and it was 3 other Black girls that were in the class, crowded around her desk. And we were singing, we were dancing, we were just having this good time. And I just remember that memory of feeling safe and having had experiences as a first grader of a racist teacher. And I didn't really understand what was going on. But then I knew when I was with this teacher, it felt different because she let us be ourselves and she poured out so much into us and allowed us to use our creativity. And so having that safe space means a lot to students. So thank you for sharing that, because it carries on with them. I'm 45 years old now, but I still remember Mrs. Johnson. And I also remember the other teacher. I'm not going to call her out, but I also remember the other teacher from first grade that made me feel small, and so it stays with them. So thank you for all the work that you're doing and being vulnerable to share that. Philip, I'm going to pass it over to you and ask you the same question about working with children with learning differences or older students with learning differences, and what is the support that they need?
I think Tammy hit it on the head, because that's actually a very good question. But I think Tammy hit it on the head when we talk about creating safe spaces. And one of the things I wound up learning over the last couple of years, primarily, was the fact that I had to assess my behavior issues in the classroom, as well as what was the root of that particular issue. And while these kids come from similar backgrounds, similar backstories, they may be, single parent homes, or they may be the only child, or they may be nonverbal versus partially verbal. This is my first year doing kindergarten this past year. So I've taught K through 12 at this point. But one of the more challenging things that I recognized was that I had to get over myself long enough to recognize that I had to not only slow down my pace with these kids, but I had to stop assuming that these kids were getting everything that they needed at home. And so the reason why I'm circling back to that with DEI is the fact that it's like we said earlier, this is not really a race issue, but most people who are ignorant to DEI, they'll look at it as just a race issue or just a gender issue, right? And the sad part about that is you have cultures and then you have subcultures, and then you probably have subcultures underneath that. And it's our jobs as professionals to find out what a child's story is, right? And so once we find out what their backstory is, then we can then teach them to the capacity in which they can grow. Many of the parents, I'll tell you all this, and I think it's hilarious personally, but one of the things, like, for instance, I don't do well. Like, the voice that I have now, this is actually my reading voice to kindergartners. So it doesn't change. I don't do characters and all this stuff, and I couldn't figure out why these kids couldn't get into my book lesson. I was excited about the book, but they it sounds more like they being disciplined. But I realized that, like, for me, in the simplest form, I think not only in what Tammy said, in creating a safe space, you should be sure about your identity, not just as a professional, but as a child of God, in understanding that you have to stand and posture yourself out of love. And when's the last time your students heard, "I love you"? Right? Sometimes they don't even hear it at home. So you might be the first and only person that they hear "I love you" to throughout the course of the day. When I taught middle school kids, I started saying it because it actually helped my classroom management. And believe it or not, with middle schoolers, they're probably tougher than high schoolers, because their hormones are all over the place. And so when I started saying things like, "If nobody told you, I love you. If nobody told you today, I love you." And it threw them off because I'm in Durham, North Carolina, and these kids were kind of rough around the edges.
Yeah.
But one thing they could never say, nor could the parents say at the end of the experience, was that Mr. Lod was a liar and that I treated them differently than I treated anybody else. Those are the only two things I tell them to learn throughout the school year, at least with me. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Can I
go
piggyback? I want to piggyback off of what Tammy and Philip both said. This is like Philip said, I've taught every grade, and this year I was in kindergarten as well. So not only was I a teacher, but I also was a case manager. So one of the intricate things that we got to remember is when kids are diagnosed, quote unquote, as having special disabilities, we got to get the right diagnosis. We got to really find out what the diagnosis is. We got to do testing, because sometimes, like even with our basic kindergarten tests, it's not that our kids don't know the answer. So it may be a question where it's saying circle the ball beneath the table, as opposed to saying circle the ball under the table. So a lot of our kids are misdiagnosed. They're diagnosed as having disabilities because of sometimes the language barriers. Sometimes, like if you say circle the kids in the family on the test, a child might circle maybe the mom and the kids because that's all they see in their environment. That doesn't mean that the child has a learning disability. So our testing also is, to me, a lot biased. And we just got to educate our parents as well. Like, there's so many centers that can serve as advocates for our parents as well. Just because a school gives your child an IEP, that doesn't mean that's what the IEP has to be.
you don't have to accept what they say. You don't have to accept the diagnosis. Educating our parents is very essential. I'm so inspired on a daily basis by my students. Every day I start the day with affirmations. And this year I had a student, and they said that the child had autism and that she needed to be in another placement, another setting. And like Philip said, I would sit down every day and I would say, good morning, how are you? I just want to tell you today that I love you. But there's power in our words, and how we set the atmosphere determines who our kids will be emotionally and academia as well. But just how we're presenting ourselves as educators, educating our parents on what IEPs look like, being there for our kids. And when I see something on a kid's IEP that I know doesn't look right, I stand up for it. No, that's not who the kid is. It's not measurable. Sometimes educators or principals may write an IEP goal and it may not be measurable. Like, let's say if the kid is in a wheelchair, obviously the kid can't say the numbers if he has a trach. So that's not a measurable goal. But also pointing out things that are measurable and things that are not measurable can also help as well. But just like I said, just speaking life into our kids and our parents, and also letting them know what resources are available. And everything that everybody says tonight is actually going back to the mental health perspective. In order to help our children, it starts at home. What is going on in the home environment? What is going on in the home life? Kids have experienced trauma. A lot of kids that have been diagnosed with having disabilities or IEPs may have experienced abuse or some type of trauma. A lot of kids may be hungry at home, and they may bring it over into the school setting, which has also affected their academia as well.
Yes. The advocacy piece is so important in
Timmy,
the work that
can I
we
share
do.
one thing? This is a personal story. As
Yeah.
a child, I had an IEP with 5 sections, but I also lost my mother at 7. So, and in those times, it wasn't really practiced to go to therapy, but I went to a public school that had counselors, and the counselors held grief classes for us. So it was myself, there was another girl there, and I lost my mom at 7. Her mom was killed at 5, and another one had lost her mom like maybe 7 for 8th grade. And so they had this group for us at the public school in the counselor's office every Thursday. I remember we were out of class for 45 minutes every Thursday, and this counselor sat with us, and she did different exercises with us and different techniques with us to ask us how we were doing, to describe how we were feeling, to kind of help us navigate through that grief so young, because it's very difficult to navigate something that you don't understand. Right. And when you think about what children are going through at home, what they're seeing at home, what they're experiencing at home, what they're being exposed to, and when they come to school, a lot of times they're acting out based off of that. It's not personal towards you or I, but we take it personal instead of, like y'all are saying, trying to dig a little bit deeper and see, like, what is the issue? Are you hungry? Do you need a hug? Do you need to be able to sit by yourself and not be bothered because you just want alone time? That's what DEI is to its core, meeting those individual needs that are as small as, I need 10 minutes by myself in the cozy corner, or as big as, the last time I ate was when you fed me lunch yesterday. So I just think that those are a lot to deal with. I had a student whose father committed suicide. The boy was 5 years old. His dad committed suicide in the bathroom of his mother's house. So imagine your child committing suicide in your house, in your bathroom on Christmas Eve, and then you have to turn around and tell his fiance and 3 young children. These are things that these children are carrying. And if you have never carried that type of grief, you really have to learn how to help children navigate something that you've never dealt with. And that's where education becomes more than just teaching the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah. And,
Th-
this belief that children are little adults, they're not, they're cognitively, they're not, emotionally, they're not. And thank you for sharing our personal story. I know, Steve, you
Miss T-
had something. Yes.
yes, ma'am. I know I'm in the presence of like-minded people because we all think about the common humanity of the people we're dealing with. And it's not just kids who are coming into the classroom with these issues. There are adults, young adults, middle-aged adults, older adults who come into my classroom with an accommodation or a need that I need to meet because of whatever their condition is. And I've never understood why an instructor or a teacher would push back and say, well, I'm not going to comply with the accommodation. This book is for the people who are so hell-bent on not meeting people where they are, where the need is. And there's so many examples of other students seeing an accommodation being met, and they feel good that that student who has been diagnosed with something is getting the individual attention that they don't necessarily need.
Yeah.
And by that example and setting the right kind of environment and climate in the classroom, now other students start opening up, even though they might not have an accommodation, they have life happening for them as well. And they want to talk about it. And I make sure everyone in the class knows you could come here and be who you are, and you could talk about anything. And if I could be of assistance to you, I will. And like has been said previously, letting the students know I appreciate you. That's what I open up with every class session. I close with every class session. I appreciate you being here. I care about you. Thank you for being a member of this class, but because without you, there would be no need for me. And I see it in the course critique or feedback. These students know I might be hard and I might have my ways, but they know I care about them. Not just care about them and whether they're turning assignments in or not, but I want to dig deep and find out why. What is preventing you from turning this assignment in? And a lot of times is I don't have a plate, I don't have a space at home to do homework. I don't have internet, I don't have a computer, I don't have running water. And those things help empathy come into place. And once I find that stuff out, now it's my job to meet them where they are. Okay, how can I satisfy your need or get you a resource that will help fill the gap? And that's what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like in action.
Yes, I love that. How you all are breaking it down to be it's not just race, it's not just one thing. It's complex, it's multidimensional, it's so many layers. And that's why it impacts everyone. And, changing the message and the myths and breaking it down is so important. I want to get to Dr. Longmire here. Thanks for hanging tight with your little one and staying on. I wanted to ask you, from your perspective in early childhood education and also your background in substance abuse counseling, what are the most significant obstacles that you feel are present that really block inclusive learning environments?
Thank you. I appreciate being here and I appreciate that question. Your question brings two fields together, right? Substance abuse and early child education. And as an educator and someone who's have substance abuse counselor background, I rarely see these topics talked together in the same space, right? It's like it's separate. Substance abuse, drugs abuse, addiction, then education. But when I think about obstacles, they are truly exclusive in learning classrooms environments and how children really develop. I think that substance abuse and education is also sometimes reciprocal to each other. I have seen so many parents struggle with substance abuse, but they try to take care of their kids. They don't have the right resources. I I can just physically tell that the child is not being properly taken care of. I can see that the home life is wrecked. I can tell when a parent is high come pick up their child. I can smell the drugs. And I just feel like it's just a major fail, especially for early child education, because it's not talked about. I just think that we are used to keeping addiction and education separate, but they really work together if you look at it. And from an early child education perspective, one of the most significant barriers is the assumption that readiness is something that children must achieve before they deserve access to a rich and exclusive environment, right? They must know their ABCs. They must be well behaved. They must know this. They must learn how to write. But all children don't come with those goals met. A lot of them, they come with hunger, trauma, like I said, addiction. That's a whole different animal. So my question, that I will pose to an educator, how are you creating your environment to be an exclusive to all children so they can strive, so they can learn? All kids don't come ready, but how are you going to help them get ready? And that's what DE is about. And I see how quickly children can thrive when environments adapt to them rather than the other way around, right? We should adapt to them. They should have to adapt to, like, we should be meeting them. They should not have to meet this imaginary goal or like this typical goal. Every child has their own goals in place, and we should be there. That's what DEI is about. And lastly, I rarely see schools preparing, teaching, and training teachers, both in general education, special education, about how to deal with families properly that suffer trauma, abuse, and addiction, right? How do you deal with this child who is mute because there's addiction? The addiction keeps her mute. She don't know how to express herself. So she may not have a disability. She just may have trauma. And if she wants to get help for the trauma, how will she flourish? How do teachers notice the sign of abuse and addiction? How they know, can they notice or start having signs if a parent came high? How do you know they being neglected? It's just all types of things. I just feel like teachers are really trained in and educating in. And I just seen so many children lose their lives to addiction through the course, get them taken away from kids, physically harm. And I just feel like I just want addiction and early child education and education period to be talked about more, because it exists, it coexists together. But I just don't think that many educators, whether it's in public schools, private charter, they're not really to have that conversation. They're like, okay, leave this to the counselor, leave this to us. But it's like, we have to bring it together. And I think that's part of DEI.
Yeah, we're not trauma informed the way we should, because what you're speaking about, a child being traumatized and not speaking, that's called selective mutism. I actually have a niece who suffered from that. It is a real diagnosis. I suffered from it when I was a kid, but that's not what they called it back then. They didn't have a term for it, but it is a real diagnosis. And when a child goes through trauma, it puts them in a position where they are guarded. And that's why they're quiet, because they feel like if they are quiet, they still have that power. But once the child gets used to you and feels comfortable with you, then they will start to open up to you. So we're not as trauma informed as some of us think we are when it comes to dealing with our students. And you're right, we do put things off on counselors, but there are a lot of schools now that do not have multiple counselors to deal with the 800 kids in the building. They got one counselor for 800 kids, and there's no way possible that one counselor can do it. So I do think when we're doing these professional development days, even when you're getting your degrees or you're doing your Act 48 credits, I do feel like some type of trauma-informed training should be merged in with that. Right now, it just seems like we're rushing through those hours to say that we have them, and then we can get through until we have to do it again. And it's the same thing in childcare. You have to have 12 hours of professional development every year. And you rush through it, and you're having your administrative staff doing these trainings that they've never been trained on. So if you've never been trained to do it, how can you teach me? So it just becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and I know I've heard teachers talk about there's such a focus now on the testing and the, making sure that the school gets the metrics that they need, and it takes away the time that they want to spend in working directly, with students. So thank you all for this conversation that we're having. I want to leave some time and space for you to talk about Dr. Robinson, the conference that you have coming up, and then I'm going to open it up to the panel with a final question as well. But please share with the audience. In 3 days from this viewing, the conference is going to launch. So please talk a little bit about that.
All right, guys, here we are. This is Volume 3 of the Educators Rise, was to change the DEI impact anthology, Bridging the Gaps. We have done Volume 1. We have done Volume 2. And Volume 3 is in the process of being printed. This is a big moment for me. And I was sharing a little bit with Dr. Alicia about it because I never envisioned this being what it is. Right? So this is the second annual conference. We're celebrating the launch of Volume 3, but really we're celebrating the anthology series, Volume 1, 2, and 3. It is going to be on Saturday, July 18th, 2026, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Hilton Gardens Inn in Exton, Pennsylvania. I have some goodies lined up. So you never know what you're going to get when you come to one of my conferences. Dr. Alicia was there last year. Tammy, who had to get off, she was there last year. Philip was there last year. I had a lot of giveaways. You never know what I have up my sleeve. You don't know what's going to come about this. You want to be in the room. You want to hear these powerful stories. There are going to be books available for purchase. I don't know what the rest of the authors are doing because we did do a pre-sale and that is over. The incentive was your name would be mentioned in the book under the acknowledgments. I'm still doing a pre-sale special. You guys can still do a pre-sale special if you like and come up with whatever you want your incentive to be. But this is the conference that it's not about form or fashion. It's about impact. And so we're coming together. The authors are doing an author panel. I have a few keynote speakers that are going to speak, but we're really coming together to discuss the movement and change. And, there is a saying, each one teach one. There's also a saying to be the change that you want to see. So if you want to not just talk about it and be about it and put your feet to the work, then this is a conference that you want to go to. If you want more information, you can either visit my website at educatorsriseenterprises.com or you can email me personally at educatorsrise@gmail.com for my special that I have going on. That's all I got.
Thank you. We'll make sure I'll have that in the podcast description so everyone can follow you and stay connected because I know you're all are going to continue to do great things. I know I kept y'all a little long, but I just have one last question, short and sweet, that I'm going to open up to everyone. And that is just what words of advice or guidance would you give to a new teacher who's coming in, who wants to make sure that they are practicing and showing inclusivity and practicing all of the elements of DEI? And whoever would like to start first can.
I'm going to start first because I got to grab something.
Yeah.
Get to know your students and build a rapport with their parents. If you want to have a successful year and you want to have a successful career, every group of students that you get every year, you want to get to know them and build a rapport with them so that they are comfortable with you and you're comfortable enough to be able to pull out of them what maybe they didn't know was there. Just like Philip said, this book did for him. And you want to get to know the parents and build that rapport also, because those are going to be your allies. If you build the relationship, you'll have the support. If you don't, you'll get a lot of pushback. So that's my advice.
Thank you. Dr. Longmire, would you like to go next?
I couldn't say it better than her. As an educator, I realized the importance of having strong family relationships and connections, especially with parents, even though they can be wrong at times. But that's when empathy and sympathy come through because they go through their own issues. You don't know if they're going through a divorce. You don't know if they're process losing their house. You don't know if they lost their job. You don't know if they savings account is drained. So, I learned how to sympathize with parents when things get rough and how to build that soft spot with them for the enrichment of the child. And parents and teacher relationship is not always the easiest. It's not. Sometimes you get those parents, they easygoing. And sometimes you get rough around the edges. But ultimately as an educator, you have to stand in and know who you are as a professional. And doing your best to bridge that gap between teacher and parent and teacher and family.
Thank you. Dr. Broughton, I'll go to you next.
Tonight, we've talked a lot about kids, but I'm a affirmative action believer as well, that as teachers, so many times we talk about the needs of the kids that we forget about the needs of the teachers. And to me, mental health for teachers is very, very much important, because if we're not good for ourselves, we're definitely not going to be good for the teachers. So the advice that I would give, I would say, do what you can. You don't have to be a perfectionist. A little bit at a time as you're going along. As I always say, to be equipped in the classroom, we got to prioritize. We got to have rest. We got to find balance. We got to believe in ourselves. We got to find a mentor. Well, I don't know what's going on. There should be someone there that can provide me guidance and can serve to me as a mentor. We got to create safe places, not only for the kids, but also for the adults as well. It's very important to me as a teacher to create that safe space for me as well. Reach one, teach one, reach a teacher, teach a teacher, mentor a teacher, be there for another teacher, speak life to another teacher, because right now, teacher positions are turning over. Teachers are leaving, and we need to really, it's good to think about the kids, but I'm like, what about the adults as well? We got to speak life to each other. So my thing I would give, advice that I would give, start small. You can't fix everything, and you're not meant to, but focus on building trust for your parents and peers. Create that space, safe place for your families, definitely for yourself. Reach out for support when you need it. Don't be afraid to ask for help or resources if you need it. And remember, your presence and compassion can change the life of a child. Reach one, teach one.
Thank you. And Steve and then Philip, advice that you would give to a new teacher coming in that wants to practice DEI and not have it be performative. What advice would you give?
Yes, ma'am. Just following Dr. Broughton, you can't pour from an empty cup. That sums up very well the holistic overview of what new teachers need to realize when they come into these spaces. I have simple advice, and I might be the rookie in the room because I've only been teaching for a little bit under 10 years, but the little things matter. If you throw a rock into a body of water, it ripples, right? A small pebble can also destroy a windshield. So the power of the small things can have very negative effects, like you mentioned earlier with a teacher who brushed you off, or the other teacher who has a huge impact on your life just by showing that you care. You can have all the degrees and the training that you want to, but you gotta care. And the kids gotta know you care. Your colleagues need to know that you care, because you will have people that you should be able to go to in that on campus at that school to seek the advice, like Dr. Broughton said. And understand everybody's not going to be welcoming or willing to share, and that's okay. there's somebody out there who will share and give you some tips and tricks to figure out that problem student, or if you're running into a roadblock. If you do those small little things, everything else tends to kind of fall in line. And the students are going to reap the benefits of doing those small things because they talk and they tell, Dr. Broughton cares. Mr. Maynard, you know, he is what he is, but he cares about me. He ain't going to take no late assignments, but he does love me. And I make sure they know that. I'm giving you this 0 because I love you.
Because I love you.
You know?
I'm just going to give you an A. You got to earn.
No, you earned this, right? And I love you so much that I'm not going to give you another chance.
Right.
No, take this L and learn from it and be better the next time, and not ridiculing them and that kind of stuff. So creating a positive environment, as much duress as teachers are under, it is really difficult to maintain positivity, but you got to find it somewhere. You got to find it. And if you love on the students, it'll be reciprocal. That would be my advice for new educators.
Thank you.
Tamea,
And
one
Philip,
more thing.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about advice to educators. Now, my advice to the administrator, because that goes more into what Dr. Alicia was talking about. I just put together a 6-hour professional development experience. It's called Refuel, Restore, and Reimagine, because educators deserve spaces to breathe too. So this is a merge of those things that you have to talk about, but also sprinkling in the teacher, because you go into professional development and it's all about what the expectation is of you as a teacher, how you can meet the need of the students, how you need to build relationships and rapport with the families, what you need to do this and do that. But like Dr. Alicia said, in those trainings and in those courses, there's nothing about the teacher. I can't pour from an empty cup. And so I need to refuel, I need to restore, and I need to reimagine as well.
It starts from the top down. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Philip, I'd like to leave it with you. What would be your advice for educators and, as Dr. Heather said, administrators? What advice would you give?
Ooh, the short answer would be make sure this is something you want to do. I think we come under the impression that, teachers get the weekends and they get holidays and they get summer break. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. So if you're coming in here for the long term, I will say, don't look at it from, August until May or June, whenever your school gets out. Start with Monday to Tuesday. Then try to make it to the end of the week, because you'll wind up overwhelming yourself because you have to do a couple of things to make sure that you have the stamina to last 180 days. And one of the things I would say is this: make sure you're able to check your baggage at the door so you can pick up your students' baggage. Because you're going to have to carry that all day. And in some cases, it's going to your hours as an educator does not stop at 3:30. I don't know any educator who really does this for a living who does not, plan on the weekends or worry about their kids during the breaks because they know about their home situation. Or like, for instance, the summer, what are their children doing? What skill sets or resources have you invited the parents to give their kids while they're not in your presence? And so the way I look at it now, because I'm so thankful that I did go into to the kindergarten level or the elementary school level as I'm older, is because now I have a different posture about what education should look like. I've always believed that education, if you break it down, is to take the nature of, or to take the action of drawing out. So now I go in a lot clearer because I'm more confident in who I am as a man, and I don't fit the stereotype being in the kindergarten, right? And so understanding that for any new teacher and even administrators, you have to create a culture that's more conducive to the character of who you are, as well as what is going to be the spirit. When we talk about school spirit, everybody talks about mascots and sports and athletics, but the school spirit that I'm talking about is, what are we doing to meet those needs? And if we're being specific, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If they're already getting the basic clothing, food, and shelter, the next thing they have to get is safety. But you can't give a child a safe space if they're not getting fed in the morning. If they're not getting fed in the morning, then you're going to have an uphill battle all day. And then you compound that with, like the kids that I have, you compound that with the fact that, okay, these parents did not even teach them how to be potty trained this whole time. So now you're trying to make up 5 years worth of negligence in a span of 180 days.
Right.
So that's why you have to check your baggage at the door to pick up their burdens. And then at the end of the day, when you're able to, you drop theirs so you can pick yours back up.
Yeah.
And you really have to take on the impression that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I would even say that for school leaders. You know, you can't just can't stick bodies into slots just because you're missing an EC teacher or a TA. You have to find somebody willing to do the work, willing to wipe noses, willing to chase them around the classroom, you know, because if you know, have people who are competent, because a person with a degree only tells you that they can theoretically teach a classroom. Once they hit the ground running, now you got to put all that into practice. And if they don't know how to do that because they don't teach that at the higher levels, then they're gonna be burnt out by October, November usually. They won't make it a whole year. So take it one day at a time, and remember to give yourself grace at the same time. That was a long way of saying just what I wanted to say at the end.
No, it's never too long. I thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Heather, for agreeing to be a part of the podcast. And I just enjoyed this conversation. We could talk on for hours and hours about it. I definitely will be checking out your books. And audience, please stay in touch, stay tapped into Educators Rise Enterprises, all of this excellence that you've heard from today, and definitely would love to have you back again in the future as you continue to rise and all the work that you're doing. So thank you so much. See you soon.